Are you ready? Who are your people? Who are your people? Who are your people?
Who are your people?
Who are your people?
Who are your people?
Who are your people?
Who are your people? Written by Bakari Sellers, illustrated by Reggie Brown. When you meet someone for the first time, they might ask, who are your people and where are you from? Who are your people?
I mean, come on, how cool is kids reading your book? That's pretty tight. How you doing?
I'm doing good. I was waiting to see you in your pajamas reading a page or two, but I will take it.
Well, as you might recognize the room, that was my kid. It was the last one. $5 says that I get a text from my mom about his runny nose in that. If you watch, and it'll be like, who are you? My people are overprotective Jamaicans who micromanage. I don't know about yours. But
Good luck with that. But no, that was beautiful. That brings a tear to my eye. That's why you write books like this.
That's why you write books like this. But why? That's why you write books like this. Bakari Sellers, CNN analyst or political contributor, author, lawyer extraordinaire. And thank you so much for being with us today. What a beautiful book. And we're going to hear from more kids through it and read some more passage of it. So, but you started off with, why'd you write the book, right? And I'd love to hear, I think folks would like to hear what animated or motivated your decision to write it in the first place.
Well, first of all, let me just say that I'm from the big city of Denmark, South Carolina, where we have 3 stoplights and a blinking light. And so my mom and dad would always say the 2 most important words in the English language are the words thank you. And so thank you to everybody at the Raben Group and everybody in the Raben family. I know you all very well. Shout out to you, Elliot, as somebody who is just a dope presence on TV. You know what you're talking about most of the time. 75-80%, which is better than most. I mean, you're batting above average. But seriously, just thank you for your friendship and fellowship. And thank you for this opportunity. I wrote this book because as you begin to have kids, you start searching out material for them. And you start looking to see different images and photos and pictures and books and movies that they can consume. And I was really tired of seeing like blue and purple people. I was tired of seeing people who didn't look like Sadie and Stokely. And so, myself and Reggie sat down, and that the images that you see in the book are the father walking their children through, or his children through the pages of our history, or me, Sadie, and Stokely. And so it was just an awesome opportunity to give children of color an opportunity to see themselves. It's a lot like Encanto, that you can see and feel the images of who your people are. And so I just took that opportunity to do it.
Now, what I was struck by is your own memoir written, I don't remember how many years ago you wrote it, 5-10 years ago. My Vanishing Country.
19. It was 20. It came out in a pandemic. I know that adds.
I am aging in like 2020 years, so I don't. Whatever, you read it like when I was a little kid. But needless to say, My Vanishing Country is about legacy and where you came from, and how much of the same animating principles behind all that led into the writing of this book.
Well, I'll tell you for everybody out there watching, and Elliot, for your future children's book, it's an extremely hard genre to break into.
Yeah.
I literally had to write a New York Times best-selling adult book just for the children's department at HarperCollins to say, we might give you an opportunity to do this. In the book, though, I mentioned a proverb that it takes a village to raise a child. And that is something that is a common theme between both of those books, the adult book and the children's book, because I'm from the country, man, where if you come to Denmark today, it's 3,000 people. And if you come to Denmark, all of them will tell you, about 90% of them will tell you that we're all cousins. They're like, that was my cousin last night on TV with Don Lemon. Like, it's that type of familiar relationship. We have a track that separates the sides of the town. I'm from Sado. The other side is Sugar Hill. Everybody communes together. It truly is a village. I mean, if you got in trouble, as you probably know, in a small town, small community, everybody got an opportunity to raise you. And so when you have success, everybody shares in that success. And so that is the village, and that's the theme between the 2 books.
One of the, from right off the first page of the book, is when you meet someone for the first time, one of the things that may come up is, who are your people? And it's almost like normalizing this question of background and identity along the lines of, what's the weather today, or who's your favorite basketball team, go Nets, whatever it might be. But But was that what it was like in Denmark, where, who are your people is just a fundamental thing that right off the bat is part of who you are and you ought to talk about?
Yeah, I mean, I think you should talk about your people as long as they're not the eighth seed in the Eastern Conference. You should have no pride in that.
Okay.
But,
Okay,
but
I see you.
but yeah, I mean, it's about having pride in who you are. It's about getting to know people and legitimately meeting people where they are. Who are your people? It helps people understand where people. The question is, like, did your mama and daddy grow up in the church, or was your daddy the dude who used to steal bicycles, right? Like, who are your people? Tell me about yourself. And then I wanted kids to be able to read this book, and adults, because you see the images. You see the image of the sit-in. You see the pictures in the clouds. You see these individuals. And for some adults, we've forgotten our history. So it's a good refresher. So when you sit down and read the book, you want to go and learn. And some kid may say, Mommy, Daddy, what did this person do in history? And you get an opportunity to educate yourself and educate your children. I just think that was a powerful tool. This book won't eradicate racism by any stretch, but it is a tool in the toolbox of how to talk to your children about, one, being proud of themselves, and two, about the issues of race.
Yeah, and I think there was a bit of a narrative after 2020 that racism had somehow ended in America because Americans were talking about it. Now, look, it's a wonderful and beautiful development that people are starting to, or at least far more than when you and I were kids. However, it's still there, and it's reality, right? It's
reality, and we're realizing the construct that race is. We're understanding that racism is a learned element. Children aren't born racist. And so the more we're able to teach children through the eyes of resources such as this book and many others, they're able to, one, maybe learn about themselves, or two, maybe learn about others that they're in the sandbox with. I want everyone to have pride in this culture, everyone to have pride in this history. And I think you grow a level of empathy for the person that you're playing with and sitting with. And this isn't Sadie and Stokely's favorite book, I must admit. It's kind of hurtful to Dad to have a whole book with you in it, but they like their number book and letter book a little bit better. But it will give the individuals they come in contact with a little bit of a history about who they are, and it'll give Sadie and Stokely some knowledge of who their people are.
Oh no! If I ever write a book, it's going to be my children's favorite book. Like every night. I know, right? Every night before bed, it's like, you see this mortgage? You like that? Come on.
I point at it and I'm like, do you want to read this? And they're like, not yet, not yet. That's their favorite thing. So, but they'll tell you who is in it and who's on the front of it. But maybe when they see it out in the street, maybe they'll enjoy Daddy's book then. Tough crowd.
Let's hear from some more kids reading sort of the next chunk of the book. And I have a bunch of questions for you about some of the stuff that's in there too. All right.
Your people were fighters. When they were told they had to leave because of the color of their skin, they sat down.
Your people were mighty activists, champions that struggled for justice and equality. They marched so that people would know your life matters. And they stood up and ran to make history and change lives.
Your people were trailblazers who changed laws and broke records. Today we stand on their shoulders.
Now, one thing I want to ask about, undeniably, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, a lot of this is framed in terms of the Black experience in America, right? And it's a significant one, certainly. But I don't want to ask how universal are the themes, because look, everybody is touched by race and identity and so on. But how universal are the themes in the book, right? And how did you intend to reach a broader audience beyond just Black kids and Black families in centering the work in the Black experience so much?
I mean, to be even more specific, I mean, it is a Southern Black experience, right? And so, and the answer is yes. I mean, these themes are cross-cultural, I guess one can say. It centers this Southern Black experience, but it puts it in a format and through imagery and words and rhythm that everyone can understand. I mean, it talks about the value of community. It talks about the value of lineage. The cultural figures that we teach are not just, these Black cultural figures, although we embrace them and many times put them up in our churches in the reception areas. Like, when you come to my church in the basement where we have the receptions and fellowships, it's Jesus, Martin Luther King, and Barack Obama, right? And so we still have all of these images that we claim to be our own, but we put them and portray them in a way that that any American or anybody throughout the world can embrace them and love them just as we do. But we learn who they are, and we learn one of the most important things, which is pushing back on this very perverse American ideal that somehow we should be colorblind. Instead, I say no. I would wholeheartedly refute that. I want you to see the true value and diversity of who we all are. And so that's why we put this book together, and it's meant for all people. It says 4 to 8, but it's meant for all people of all ages.
You know, on this we should be colorblind point, if there's any one thing, again, getting back to 2020 and the discussions of race that seem to be happening outside of the Black community now, this idea, well, frankly, Bakari, even tied to current events, and laws being passed around gender and sexuality and what kids can talk about in schools, and this idea that learning about history ought to or is somehow not age appropriate. It's madness, this idea. I remember when I was hosting on Sirius a couple of weeks ago, this guy called in saying, I think kids are too young to learn about race in 3rd or 4th grade. And my response back was, if I could be called the N-word in kindergarten, kids are old enough to hear about why it's a bad thing. And I think it extends to all sorts of other areas of study or understanding that are now kind of a forefront of the national debate around education.
I mean, we talked about this at the beginning, I guess, in the first segment, that many of these ideals are taught and learned at a very young age. And so, you know, why not put forth every resource or tool necessary for children to learn as much as possible? I mean, you can learn hate in 3rd and 4th grade, right? You can learn racism and xenophobia in 3rd and 4th grade. You can learn how to treat your neighbors, or you can learn how to, you know, love your neighbors or understand or grow a heart of empathy. And, you know, I don't see the problem with, you know, teaching young people in a fashion about our truth. And, you know, we've gotten some pushback because of images of the slave fields and cotton fields in the book. We've gotten some pushback because of the images of the sit-in movement. And how do you expect to teach a 4th grader about that? I mean, you just tell them the truth. I mean, like you would teach them anything else. And so you were correct in saying that. I think the word that I'm looking for here is the anti-intellectualism that we have in this country is running rampant through our generation. We must shield our kids from it so they can be better than us.
Look, George Washington was a great American. George Washington also owned people as slaves. Both,
no, both can be true statements. Right?
They're not exclusive facts, and I think we have right, and maybe even there are people that bristled when I said that George Washington's a great American, but he was right. But he owned people as slaves, and I think we ought to somehow. One side is getting the point that it can be complicated and legacies can be mixed. I think a lot of people somehow merely recognize, and again, this is I keep thinking of Florida as the forefront of this, but it's all over the country. And now increasingly public libraries, not just academic institutions, public libraries. Maybe Bakari Sellers' book is banned one day. I don't know. That's more a comment in the form of a question. I don't know if you want to respond, but I got another question.
I mean, we are receiving some pushback from it, but there's more good than bad. And it's a unique time. It really is. I mean, you see people, some of our colleagues whose names are on pieces of legislation to prevent them from coming to the state, to prevent them from speaking to young people, to prevent them from having books that are read in schools. I just don't understand where we are in this country's history. I just, you know, when we have to go back even further than we're comfortable to look and see that we're repeating some of the lessons from generations before that should not be talked about. However, or repeated, not talked about, should not be repeated. However, I'm hopeful though, and the response to this book has made me hopeful. And watching young people even on the screen today makes me hopeful, because I truly believe the number one issue we have in this country is that we have an empathy deficit, where people no longer care to know who people are or where they're from. And maybe this will be a salve to that wound.
So this isn't totally on point for your book, but we got to talk about Ketanji Brown Jackson for a second.
Sure.
For a big reason. So much of the discourse over the last, probably since the day Joe Biden, back in your home state of South Carolina, announced putting a Black woman on the court, has been what a special moment that would be for Black girls, for Black boys, for Black people in America to see themselves represented. But getting back to this question of universality, in a way, it's important for white kids
No
to
question.
see Black excellence and to see the or to rethink the idea or have a different model of what a Supreme Court justice ought to be. And I think reading your book, this gets back to the point we were talking about a second ago. It's important for white or just children of all races to read books like this. But back to Ketanji Brown Jackson. I want to hear your thoughts about the last.
I was like, okay, Don Lemon, is there a question in there somewhere? Okay.
Okay. All right.
No, when I see Ketanji Brown Jackson, Justice Jackson, it warms your heart beyond, imagine. I mean, for me, it's seeing somebody who embodies the American dream. For me, it's seeing someone who my daughters can see themselves in. For me, it's somebody who represents the struggles of my mom, who helped desegregate her high school class at Hamilton High School in Memphis, Tennessee. Our struggle wasn't that long ago, right? And what she represents is a 223-year struggle just to have a Black voice, a Black woman's voice on that Supreme Court. And, it's just it's a moment that we'll look back in history and truly understand. I think there's so much going on around us right now that I'm not sure that everyone truly embraced the history that was that moment. But I think that we will. And so, when we write the book or the next book of Who Are Your People, or whomever may write the book of our country's history and their heroes and heroines, Ketanji Brown Jackson deserves a page of her own.
Yeah. And just to second that point, my gosh, what profound news it was, buried in the trauma and strife that's going on in the world right now. But yeah, no, 20, however long from now, perhaps we can look back and embrace it for the moment it was. Let's hear one more cut of folks reading the book, young folks reading the book, and then we can talk about that on the other side too.
When they ask you, where are you from? You are from a land where the soil is dark and matches the richness of your skin, where cotton and sugarcane were strongly rooted and matched your strength and determination.
From a place where the aromas of cakes and pies wafted from the windowsills to fill your bellies with goodness and your hearts with love.
You are a product of the proverb, it takes a village to raise a child.
On their shoulders,
you are so strong.
You're so strong.
And so loved.
So loved. On your shoulders, you can reach for the sky.
I just would watch kids reading this book all day. One thing, so we talked about the village point. No need to return to that. What I want to talk about is food.
Yeah.
Right. And again, you're centering this in the Black Southern experience, but think of how central and important the experience around food is for so many cultures, and what was behind that for you, and just even memories from your own coming up around eating and the communal table.
One of the things about writing, though, Elliot, I'll tell you, is that I've learned that in order for me to be a successful writer of either genre, however you pronounce it, you have to be able to take people to a place where they can utilize their senses. And so whether or not it was My Vanishing Country or Who Are Your People, I wanted you to not only be able to kind of see the images, but I wanted you to be able to smell them and taste them and feel them. And I try to use my words as such. And I've also learned that in court, it's a lot better if you can have a jury that's able to just not hear and see, but also if they can maybe feel it or taste it or smell it, then they usually are able to take themselves to another place. That's the same thing with this part of the book. And, I come from a place, and I was thinking then about my Aunt Jenny Marie. And Jenny Marie was, she was the matriarch of our family. She was the person in our family who, I don't know how many of you all have had to have those conversations with individuals who were, 80, or in her case, she was 92, about not driving anymore. And you have to take away the keys, those difficult conversations. She was the one who sat at the front of the church, and she wore the big hat, and she wore Chanel number 5. So every time you hugged her, you smell like Chanel all day long. And she cooked these pies, and these pies were all made with they were either coconut or sweet potato, but they were all made with at least a stick, probably 2 sticks of butter, right? But you could just smell them and taste them. And it was just, she is always a part of my village. And I was thinking about her when I wrote that, because we all have those individuals who mean that much to us.
What a powerful place to end it, Bakari. So that's really what I've got for you today. Just wanted to walk you through the book before we hear from some more kids on the other side. Anything else before we go? One that I didn't ask you, or if you continue to mock my manner of asking questions, by all means, you may do.
No, I don't know. I don't know how you guys are taught up there, but I always thought questions had question marks.
Oh, Jesus. Oh, man. You are.
I want to say thank you, Elliot, for your friendship, man. I just want to end where I began, and thank you all for where you all are. The book is sold everywhere books are sold, from Barnes and Noble to, if you're in DC, Mahogany Books. I always shout out my local. If you're in Delaware, Philadelphia, go to Uncle Bobby's. I always like to shout out my independent booksellers, but please support it. One of the things about supporting authors and Black authors is that we only get opportunities if we do well, and we only allow others to get opportunities. And so maybe now Elliot will be able to write his next book for us all. So I just want to say thank you so much for the support and love, and I look forward to seeing you all soon.
So a couple things. One, we've got a URL that we've been running throughout the event, linking to the page for the book. 2, if you're in Washington, D.C., which is a couple, a bunch of our viewers will be there. Solid State Books is our local bookstore here. East City Books on Capitol Hill. There's a lot of them. So support small, and that's where folks can get this book. 3, you are my people, Bakari Sellers. A lot of ribbing each other about all kinds of business, but I'm so grateful for your mind and guidance and friendship, and more importantly, for writing a children's book. As somebody with 2 little kids myself, it's hard to get good books. Now, it's easier than we were when we were little, when they weren't as diverse or as broad. But thank you for writing a book that spoke to my kids, and they loved, as you saw, reading it. So thanks for being here. Thanks for joining us. Thanks to everybody for tuning in. This conversation is going to live on the Raben Group's YouTube page. We have programming throughout the year, not as exciting and as charming as this guest may be, but we will have more. So stay tuned and join us. And so we're going to close it out the only way we know how, with kids reading a book. So let's say goodbye with more children from the Raben Group reading Bakari's book. Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
So what will you dream, and how will you change the world?
So what will you dream, and how will you change the world?
So what will you dream, and how will you change the world?
So what will you dream, and how will you change the world?
So when will you dream, and how will you change the world? Hmm?